Hello and welcome to the mini book podcast, African American Books Edition.
Great to be here.
Today, we are going to be stepping into the pages of a truly monumental work of American literature and history.
It really is.
The narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, written, of course, by the man himself.
An absolutely essential text. This is one of those books that doesn't just tell you a story, it fundamentally shifts how you see the past.
Absolutely. And before we get into it, I just want to thank you, the listener, for tuning in. If you enjoy this kind of discussion, please do consider subscribing so you don't miss what's coming up.
We should also mention, just as a quick note, that our voices are generated by AI.
That's right, but the content, all the insights, that comes straight from the book itself.
And we really feel this is a fantastic way to learn about African American history. But nothing replaces reading Douglass in his own words. So after you listen to this, we really encourage you to go out and purchase the book.
Yes, support the author's legacy, keep these stories alive.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's set the stage. The book was published in 1845.
A long time ago. But the writing feels so immediate, so modern.
It really does. Now, our mission with this exploration is to look at what Douglass called the dehumanizing machinery of slavery.
Right. It's not just about the physical violence, though we will get to that.
Yeah.
It's about the psychological engineering. He gives us a blueprint for how the system was designed to strip people of their humanity.
And the incredible battle he had to fight intellectually and physically to reclaim it.
Exactly.
So let's start with that dehumanization, because Douglass kicks off his story with something most of us just take for granted.
His birthday.
Or the fact that he doesn't have one.
It's such a striking way to begin. He says he has no idea how old he is and that most slaves know as little of their ages as, and this is his quote, as horses know of theirs.
Wow, that comparison to livestock right on the first page.
It's completely intentional. He says white children knew their ages, but he wasn't even allowed to ask. It's a way of robbing you of your own personal history. If you don't have a birthday, you're not really a person with a story. You're just there.
That erasure of history, it extends to his family, too. His mother, Harriet Bailey, I mean, he barely knew her.
It was standard practice to separate them. She was hired out to a farm 12 miles away from him.
12 miles.
And the detail that just guts you is that she would walk those 12 miles at night.
After a full day's work.
After a full day in the fields, just to lie down with him for a few hours while he slept. And then she had to walk all the way back before sunrise, or she'd get whipped.
So he never even saw her in the daylight.
Almost never. He says when she died, he felt almost nothing, like a stranger had died. That's the machinery at work. It successfully broke that bond.
And then there's the other side of it, the rumor that his master was also his father. You'd think that might offer some kind of protection?
But he says it was the opposite. It was more dangerous.
Why is that?
Because the master's wife, the mistress, would see that child, a mulatto slave, as living proof of her husband's infidelity. She would hate that child. So they were often sold off just to, keep the peace in the white family.
So no safety there. Which brings us to what he calls the blood-stained gate. This is his first real memory of extreme violence.
This, he says, was his entrance into the hell of slavery. He's just a little kid, and he's hiding in a closet.
Hiding in a closet, watching his master, Captain Anthony, whip his Aunt Hester.
And the reason was so trivial. She'd been seen with a man, another slave named Ned Roberts.
The trauma of it just leaps off the page. He was so terrified he couldn't even move after it was over.
It completely shatters any idea of safety. He realizes in that moment that could be him. That is childhood innocence just gone.
That fear sort of defines the whole environment. Let's move to the main plantation, what he calls the Great House Farm.
Right, Colonel Lloyd's plantation. And you have to picture this not just as a farm, but like a small country village. It was the central hub for everything.
So slaves on the other, more remote farms, they looked at this place with a kind of awe.
A huge amount of awe. Yeah, being chosen to run an errand there was like a major honor. It was like winning an election, he says.
But this setting leads him to tackle one of the biggest misconceptions about slavery. The singing.
Yes. The idea that because slaves were singing, they must be happy or content.
And Douglass just shuts that down completely.
He says, and this is so powerful, slaves sing most when they are most unhappy. The songs are a testimony against slavery, not for it.
He compares it to, what was it? A man on a desolate island?
Exactly. It's a cry of sorrow and pain, a prayer to God for deliverance. It is not a sign of contentment.
That just completely reframes the whole idea of the spiritual. Speaking of the plantation, there was another psychological tool they used, the garden.
Ah, yeah, the tarred fence. This is a brilliant and cruel example of control.
So the colonel has this beautiful garden full of fruit, and of course, the slaves are hungry.
So they're tempted to steal some. To stop them, the colonel tars the entire fence around the garden.
And the rule was simple.
If you had tar on you, you were guilty. You got whipped.
No questions asked. You could have just brushed against it by accident.
Didn't matter. The tar itself was the proof. It made them afraid of the fence itself. It's, a perfect little microcosm of the system. Constant paranoia.
So Douglass is in this world, and then his life takes a huge turn. He's sent to Baltimore.
A complete change of scenery. He goes to live with Hugh and Sophia Auld.
And city life was different for slaves, wasn't it?
It was. There was a sense of public decency. You didn't want your neighbors to think you were cruel, so city slaves were generally better fed and clothed. It was about keeping up appearances.
And his new mistress, Sophia Auld, at first she's different.
She is. She had never owned a slave. She was a weaver. She hadn't been hardened by the system yet. She actually looks him in the eye.
And she starts teaching him his ABCs.
Can you imagine? It's unthinkable at the time. But then her husband, Hugh, finds out.
And he stalks her. Immediately. And he says something that changes everything for Douglass. If you give a nigger an inch,
he will take an L. And an L, just for context, is an old unit of measurement, about 45 inches. So it's the old saying, give him an inch, he'll take a mile.
And Hugh Auld says learning will spoil him. It will make him unhappy and unmanageable.
And for Douglass, hearing this, it's like a lightning bolt. It's an epiphany.
He realizes that literacy
is the pathway to freedom.
Right. That the white man's power rests entirely on keeping him ignorant. The very thing his master was forbidding is the thing he now knew he had to get.
The irony is just incredible. His master's angry speech is what gave him the motivation to learn at all costs.
So he has to do it in secret, and his strategy is just so clever.
He uses bread as tuition.
He makes friends with the poor white kids in the neighborhood.
Yeah, he'd trade them bread from his master's house for reading lessons, and eventually he gets his hands on a very specific book, the Columbian Orator.
What was so special about that book?
It was a collection of speeches, but it had one dialogue in it between a master and a slave. And in the dialogue, the slave wins the argument for his freedom using pure logic.
It gave him the language for his feelings.
You did. And it's also where he first really understood the word abolition.
Which we should clarify means the movement to abolish or end slavery.
Right. He had heard the word before, but now he understood there was an entire movement of people working to end slavery. It gave him hope.
But just as his mind is opening up, his body gets sent back to the plantation.
It's a brutal crash, back to reality. His old master dies, and he's part of the property division. He's literally lined up and valued along with the horses and pigs.
So dehumanizing.
And he ends up with a man named Thomas Auld, who finds him too opinionated from his time in the city. So he rents Douglass out to a man named Edward Covey.
And Covey has a reputation. He's known as a nigger breaker.
He's a poor man who makes his living by taking on unruly slaves and breaking their spirits through overwork and violence. This is the darkest part of the book.
It starts right away with that oxen incident.
He's never driven oxen before. They bolt. The cart crashes, he nearly gets killed, and Covey's response is to just whip him savagely.
And it wasn't just the beatings, it was the constant surveillance. They called him the snake.
Because he would literally crawl on his hands and knees through the fields to sneak up on them, to catch them resting for even a second.
And Douglass admits, for a time, it worked. He was broken.
Completely. He says the dark night of slavery closed in on him. There's this heartbreaking scene where he's looking out at the ships on the Chesapeake Bay, these symbols of freedom, and he's just paralyzed. He thinks about killing himself.
It's important to see that. He wasn't born unbreakable. The system broke him first.
Absolutely. But then comes the resurrection.
It starts when he collapses from heat exhaustion while fanning wheat.
Covey kicks him, beats him. Douglass somehow gets up and runs 7 miles to his owner, Thomas Auld, to beg for protection.
And what does Auld do?
He tells him he probably deserved it and sends him back.
Unbelievable. So on his way back, he meets another slave, Sandy Jenkins, who gives him a root.
It's this fascinating mix of folk magic and desperation. Sandy tells him if he carries this root on his right side, no white man can whip him. Douglass is skeptical, but he's so desperate he takes it.
And the next morning, Covey comes for him with a rope.
Tries to tie him up to whip him. And in that moment, something in Douglass just snaps.
He fights back.
He doesn't just push him. He grabs Covey by the throat.
Yeah.
And they fight for 2 solid hours.
2 hours.
Covey calls for help, but the other slaves refuse to get involved, and in the end, Douglass fights him to a standstill. Covey never touches him again.
Why not? I mean, why didn't Covey just kill him?
Because of his reputation. He was the nigger breaker. If word got out that a 16-year-old slave had beaten him, he'd be ruined. So he kept his mouth shut.
And for Douglass, this was, what did he call it, a glorious resurrection?
It was. He said it rekindles his sense of manhood. He was still a slave, but he was no longer a slave, in fact. He was unbreakable now.
So he has his spirit back, but he still needs his freedom. And he makes some really sharp critiques, especially about religion.
He says the most religious slaveholders were often the cruelest.
How so?
They'd use scripture to justify it. He talks about a master whipping a woman while quoting the Bible. He that knoweth his master's will and doeth it not shall be beaten with many stripes.
Wow.
He draws a very clear line between what he calls the Christianity of Christ and the Christianity of the slaveholding South.
He also has a really interesting take on the holidays. He calls them a fraud.
He sees them as a psychological tool, a safety valve. The masters would encourage drunkenness and wild behavior to make the slaves disgusted with the very idea of freedom.
To make them think slavery was better than that chaos.
Exactly. It was a way to burn off any rebellious energy.
Okay, let's get to the escape. He's very careful not to give details.
Right, because when he was writing, slavery was still legal. The Underground Railroad was still active. Giving away the methods would have endangered others.
He actually criticizes the people who bragged about helping slaves escape.
He calls it the Upper-Ground Railroad because all that talk just alerted the slave catchers.
Smart. So he makes it to New York, but it's not instant relief.
No. First there's joy, but then it's this deep loneliness and paranoia. He trusts no one. Anyone could be a kidnapper.
But then his fiancée, Anna Murray, a free black woman, comes to join him. They get married, move to New Bedford, Massachusetts.
And he gets another huge shock there, an economic one.
He expected the North to be poor because they didn't have slaves.
Right. That was the lie he'd been told his whole life. But he sees this thriving, wealthy city, clean houses, huge warehouses, and he sees black people living with dignity and working for themselves.
And then he gets his first job. He
Yeah.
earns his first wages.
And he says it was all his. There was no master standing there with his hand out to take it. That economic freedom was the final piece of the puzzle.
It's an incredible arc. From not knowing his own birthday to owning his own labor.
And owning his own story by writing this book.
So as we wrap up, what's the one big idea you think people should take away from this?
I think it's that Douglass had to literally steal himself back. He had to steal his mind through literacy, and then he had to steal his body through escape. And it started with education. That's not just a cliche. For him, knowledge really was power.
It broke the mental chains first.
Absolutely. The battle was won in his head long before he ever set foot in New York.
A powerful thought to end on. We really hope you've enjoyed this exploration of the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass.
And again, please, go buy the book. Read it for yourself. There's so much more in there.
And if you like this, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps. And tell a friend about the podcast.
And we want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and suggest books you'd like us to cover in the future.
We'd love to see what you're interested in. Thank you so much for subscribing and for listening. We'll see you next time.